That is Gittin Daf Lamed Vav discusses two more takanas of the Mishnah. One of them is a takana of signing on a shtar. The Gemara will discuss, is it really true that it's just a takana? The Gemara will explain how signatures evolved. And then the Gemara will introduce the concept of a prosbol, which is another range of takana that happened. So let's see the Gemara. We're beginning a few lines into the daf. At the two dafs, the Gemara says that we said in the last Mishnah that the only reason that witnesses sign on a shtar or a get is because of a takana made by Rav Gamliel Zaken. So Gemara said that's not true. There is a pasuk. It says v'chasav b'sefer v'chasem. You have to write things on a document and sign it. It's a pasuk in Sefer Yirmiyahu. And we learned from there that there is a mitzvah d'oraisa, an obligation d'oraisa, or halacha d'oraisa, to sign a document. So why are we saying that it's the kind of chazal? So the Gemara gives two answers. The first answer is to say that this is Rabbi Elazar, who holds Eidei Mesira Karti, as we've seen many times in Masechta. The essence of a divorce document, the essence of the activity of a divorce is the witnesses who see it. It's the giving of the get. The witnesses see that they establish a divorce, and they don't have to be signed anywhere. The get does not have to record who they are. And the only reason that we have signatures on the get at all is to keep a record of who the Eidei Mesira, who the witnesses who saw it, are, so that we'll be able to track them down and have them verify that they really saw it. And therefore, it's a tikkun olam. And this is not like other types of documents. This is the essence of the get is the giving. Now, that's Rabbi Elazar's opinion. And the reason why we need to have the record is because sometimes we won't be able to find the witnesses themselves. Sometimes they might, by the time we need them, they might be dead or they might have moved overseas. And therefore, we need to have a record of who they were. Now, that's the Gemara's first answer. The Gemara's second answer is to say that this could really be Rabbi Meir's opinion. Rabbi Meir is the one who argues on Rabbi Elazar and holds that the essence of the get is the signatures. By signing on it, they create the divorce document. And of course, then it should be daraisa that you have to sign. The Gemara says, but there was a development in how the signatures looked. In the beginning, the names were not part of the signatures. They would simply write, I am a person who signed on this, and they would establish the signatures by analyzing the handwriting and comparing it to other handwritings and confirming whom the author of this line was, even though it didn't say his name. And that was a difficult procedure, and it took time, and they had to compare a lot of different handwritings until they were able to track the guy down. So Rav Gamliel made a takana that they should actually write their name, and then at least you would know where to start. You would have the name that they have. So the Gemara asks, is this true that witnesses always have to sign their name nowadays? There were many chachamim who signed with a symbol. So you had Rav who drew a sketch of a fish, you had Rav Chanina who drew a branch, Rav Chizda drew a letter Samach, Rav Hoshia drew a letter I, and Rav Bar Huna drew a sail of a ship. So you see that you didn't have to write your name. So Gemara says the Chachamim are different. The Chachamim, because they wrote many shas v'tshuvas, they wrote many letters, people knew their signatures. They were well known. And therefore, it was as good as an identification of as if they had written their name themselves. We now move on to the next takana in the Mishnah, which is the takana of prosbol. So Gemara introduces this with the Mishnah that introduces the concept of a prosbol. Prosbol is a manner of avoiding the halacha of shmitas ksafim, that is, after Shemitah passes, all loans that were due and payable at the end of Shemitah, when the period of Shemitah occurs, are canceled. Now, the takana of prosbol was a way to avoid that. The Gemara explains that the way that it came about was that Hillel HaZaken saw that people were not lending. They were afraid that they weren't going to be able to collect their money, and therefore they were withholding their hands from lending, and this violates an Isser D'Oraisa. The Torah says, Yishamilcha Padiyah Davar V'Vavcha B'Lial. Maybe you'll do something evil, and you'll resist from lending because you see Shemitah is coming and you're afraid you're not going to get your money back. So people were doing that. So in order to prevent that, he figured out a way to cancel all halachos of Hashmatas Ksafim. Now, how does prosbol work? So the way it works, the Mishnah describes, is you transfer the collectability of the loan to the court, or of whatever the obligation is, to the court. So you write, I give over to you the judges in such and such judges in such and such place, that any obligation which is due to me, that I can collect it at any time I want. And it's really saying is that it is a court-ordered obligation to pay, and it's the court that's collecting it for me. Now, then it has to be signed, and it's signed by either the judges at the bottom or the witnesses who see this at the bottom. So now the Gemara asks, how does this work? How could you just uproot a mitzvah or an isser d'oraisa? So Gemara says, if you have something that d'oraisa is mishamet, and you don't have to pay it anymore, how is it that Hillel comes and he cancels that halacha? So the Gemara is going to offer some answers. So the Gemara quotes Abaye. Abaye says that he holds that Shemitah today is only d'Rabbanan, in accordance with Rebbe's opinion. Rebbe says in a brisa that there's a linkage between Shemitah's karka, that is the obligation to rest all land from being worked, and Shemitah's ksafim. It says Zedar Shemitah Shemait. Shemitah Shemait is referring to two different Shemitahs, one Shemitah of land, the other Shemitah of money, and the two are linked. If you don't have Shemitah of land, you can't have Shemitah of money. Today we don't have Shemitah of land because we don't have Kedushas Eretz Yisrael any longer, and therefore the halacha of Shemitah's money is cancelled as well, midaraisa. The only thing that's left is Shemitah midirabanan, and therefore, since it's only dirabanan, Chazal are free to cancel it as they wish. Now, the Gemara asks them this the opposite way. If it is true that midaraisa b'zman hazeh there is no Shemitah, that means that midaraisa, the one who owes the money has to pay it. How could Chazal come along and create Shemitah's ksafim midirabanan and force people to not pay if they don't make a prosbol, that they don't pay because they say that it's mashamit? That means that the guy's not going to pay back, but he really midaraisa he owes it because there is no Shemitah anymore. So how could we make the lender, the person who's owed, lose out on collecting if there actually has a right to collect it? So here the Gemara gives two answers. The Gemara's first answer is that no one's doing anything usher, we're just not doing it. So we call sheva va'al tasa. We're violating the halacha d'oraisa by not doing something instead of by actually doing something. The Rabbanan are allowed to do that. We find that they could say, for example, that there's no mitzvah of lulav or shofar on Shabbos. They say to desist from doing something which you otherwise would have done, that they're allowed to do even if they're uprooting something that it says in the Torah. That's the Gemara's first answer. The Gemara's second answer also answers the original question, and that is there's a rule called hefker based on hefker. The courts have a right to take money away from anybody that they want in accordance with their rulings. It's kind of like the concept of eminent domain. They have a right to create hefker, to make a person's property be hefker, be ownerless, and not belong to him any longer. This answers both questions. That's why the Hillel was able to take away the halacha of Shemitah. He was able to take the money away from the person that was supposed to hold on to it, the person who owed it, midaraisa, and was able to make it hefker from him and transfer possession of it over to the lender. And it also answers the question that we asked the other way, that if Shemitah b'zman hazeh l'Rabbanan, how Chazal were able to allow the borrower to keep the money if it really should be returned midaraisa. And that's, again, the idea of hefker bezin hefker, that the bezin have a right to take money away from people and award it to someone else. Where do we see the concept of hefker bezin hefker? So the Gemara gives two sources for it. One is it says in a pasuk in Ezra, it says anyone who doesn't come within 3 days, as in accordance with the command of the princes and the elders, he will have all his property confiscated, and he himself will be separated from the rest of the congregation of the exile. So you see that they were able to confiscate a person's property. Rabbi Eliezer says a different source. This comes from a pasuk in Yehoshua, when Yeshua was dividing up the land in Eretz Yisrael. It says, "V'Yehoshua bin Nun Rashi ha'avos lamatos." So they divided it up, and it describes Yehoshua and Rashi Ha'avos, the heads of the fathers. Right? The Gemara asks, heads of the fathers? What does heads of the fathers have to do with anything? We have heads of the tribes, not heads of the fathers. The lesson here is to link to the fathers to the heads. And just like the fathers give an inheritance to the children, the heads of the people also give inheritance to their children, which means that the Beis Din could give an inheritance, as it were. They could take property and award property in accordance with their decisions. The Gemara now has a shayla. The Gemara wants to know, when Hillel was mitaken, when he created the concept of a prosbol, did he do it for his generation, or did he intentionally set it up for all generations to follow? What's the difference? Either way, we could still use it. Gemara says the difference is if we want to cancel it. Let's say it becomes not relevant anymore. Let's say people no longer would resist lending because they're afraid they won't collect it. So can we cancel the ability to make a prosbol? Can we cancel Hillel's takana? If you say that Hillel made it for all generations, we can't, because the rule is you can only cancel a takana made by a Beis Din if you are part of a Beis Din which is equal to or greater. And we don't have such a Beis Din any longer, and therefore we wouldn't be able to cancel it even if it wasn't necessary. If, however, he only made it for his generation, and we're only doing it based off what he did, but he didn't actually make it for later generations, then we can cancel. We can make a rule that we're not allowed to do this anymore. So that's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara wants to bring a proof from something that we find that Shmuel says that you cannot make a prosbul unless you are a court on the level of that of Surah or of Narda, run by Rav and Shmuel. So that's because they're the only ones that are on the level high enough to be able to uproot money from people, and like we said, the concept is based on the business power to uproot people's possessions. So the Gemara says, if you want to say that Hillel only made it for all generations, that he made it for all generations, why would it be limited to the Beis Din of Surah and an Hardah? It should apply everywhere. Someone says that's not a kasha. It could just be that the way he set it up was initially that it should be for a Beis Din on that level, like the one on the level of Rav Ami and Rav Asi, which is strong enough and powerful enough to be able to uproot people's possessions. But for the rest of the population, he never set up a takana. Gemara now wants to bring another proof, and this is from a statement of Shmuel and from a statement of Rav Nachman. So Shmuel said he doesn't like prosbul. He finds that it's an embarrassment to the judges, and he said if I would be strong enough, I would cancel it. Gemara says you see that he could cancel it. So then why would we even consider that it is made for all generations? Shmuel wouldn't be able to say that he could cancel it. Obviously, it was only made for one generation. So Gemara says, no, what he means to say is that if I would be strong, he means if I would be strong as Hillel, if I would have it based on the level of Hillel, only then would I be able to cancel it. So he's saying the opposite. He's saying Hillel made it for all generations, and that's exactly why I can't cancel it. Now the proof from Rav Nachman is the opposite. Rav Nachman liked prosbul very much, and he wanted to actually make it stronger. So he said if it would be up to me, I would establish it. Gemara says establish it. If Hillel Hazakin made it for all generations, already established. What is he talking about? Establish it. No, he means he would establish it even more strongly. He would make it that it's a standard procedure for all contracts, even if it's not written in the contract. It's assumed that it's given over to the Beis Din and there's a prosbul implicit. The Gemara now discusses the specific meaning of a few words. So the Gemara says we had seen that Shmuel referred to ulbana dedaini. What does ulbana mean? So the Gemara also calls it aluva. What does that mean? So the Gemara says aluva means we have two options. Either it means to make it easy for them. We want it to be easy for the judges that people aren't campaigning to get prosbuls from them every Shemitah. Or ulbana could mean that it's rude, it's not fair, as we said earlier. So the Gemara says that's what it means. It means chutzpah, it means rudeness. And you find that we say that about a kala who was mizanish, was unfaithful, right under her chuppah. So Ula says, aluva kala shezinsa b'karav chupasa has the brazenness and the rudeness of a kala, a bride who is unfaithful under her wedding canopy. It says Rav Mari, the son of the daughter of Shmuel. What's the source for that? It says, while the king was still in his chuppah, my nerd, my perfume, lost its good scent. So he was referring to the unfaithfulness right close to the chuppah, as well as Klal Yisrael. It refers to Klal Yisrael being involved with the Egel at Har Sinai, just under Har Sinai, right near Har Sinai, at the foot of Har Sinai. They were already serving other gods. So Gemara says, Rava says, even though this is a rebuke, there's still a expression of love here. He says that my spice lost its smell. It doesn't say that my spice began to get a bad smell. Says the Gemara on the phrase aluva, the Gemara quotes a brisa, famous brisa, that says people who are insulted and don't insult in return, people who hear their embarrassment but don't give back, people who do mitzvahs out of love, or rejoice with difficulty about these people. It says those that love him are like the setting sun in its strength. Now the Gemara wants to know what's a prosbul. What does the word prosbul mean exactly? The Gemara says it's a contraction of the terms pros, buli, ubuti. Pruz, the Gemara says, means a takana, to be able to establish things, to fix things. And buli are poor people. Buli are rich people, and buti are poor people. That is, it's good for the rich, it's good for the poor. It's good for the rich that they should get their money back. It's good for the poor that they should have people being willing to lend them. And you know what these words mean. So as far as buli, the Gemara quotes, "V'shavarti is going uschem," I'll break the grandeur of your strength. Evasive says that refers to bula'is shebihuda, the rich people in Yehuda. Buti means the poor people because it says ha'vet tavitenu. That's a phrase about lending things to the poor. And as far as pruz, the Gemara says that Rava